Did you know your brain plays tricks on you every single day without you even realizing it? From the news you believe to the products you buy, cognitive biases shape how you think, act, and decide. But here's the kicker. These biases aren't random. They're sneaky shortcuts your mind takes to simplify life, often leading to flawed decisions. Want to know how to outsmart your own brain? Let's dive in.
All right, get ready, everyone, because today we are going deep, deep into the world of cognitive biases.
Yeah.
You know, those little mental glitches that trip us all up.
Mm-hmm. They make us predictably irrational.
Exactly, predictably irrational. And I love that.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, so it's not like we're, crazy or anything. It's just part of how our brains are wired.
Yeah. It's part of being human.
Exactly.
These fascinating little quirks that we all share.
Yeah, so we're going to do a deep dive into that today, into cognitive biases. And one of my favorite thinkers on this topic is Daniel Kahneman.
Oh, absolutely.
His book, Thinking Fast and Slow.
It's like a Bible for understanding these quirks.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And he talks about these two systems in our brain, System 1 and System 2.
Yeah, it's like this constant battle between the two.
Right. So System 1, that's our fast, intuitive autopilot.
Your gut reactions, those snap judgments, that's all System 1.
Yeah, and System 2 is our slower, more deliberate, let me think this through kind of thinking.
The one that tries to keep things in check, but sometimes fails miserably.
Right, exactly. So it's
Yeah.
System 1 is responsible for that, impulse buy at the checkout counter, and System 2 is the one carefully budgeting for the month.
That's a perfect example. And it's fascinating how these biases mainly stem from System 1. Those
Right.
quick judgments, we're going to explore how to spot them, especially when they're leading us astray.
Right, especially when they're messing us up, right?
Exactly.
Okay, let's start with confirmation bias. I think that's something we've all probably experienced.
No, confirmation bias is a big one.
Yeah.
We're all guilty of it.
It's like when you're so sure that, I don't know, keto, it's like the only way to eat.
Right.
And you only read articles that support that view.
Exactly. You're just seeking out the information that confirms what you already believe, ignoring anything that might contradict it.
Yeah, even if there are studies that say otherwise, you're like, nope, not reading that.
It's like putting blinders on.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know what? This bias, it goes way beyond just diet choices or what book you want to read.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. There was a study back in 2016 published in Psychological Bulletin, and it showed how confirmation bias actually affects our big decisions too, like political decisions, even how we perceive other people.
Wow, so it's kind of a big deal.
Oh, it's huge. It's like if you believe a certain political party is better, confirmation bias can make you interpret everything they do in a positive light, even if the evidence suggests otherwise.
Oh, that's scary. So, how do we fight back against this confirmation bias? It's like we're stuck in our own little bubbles.
Yeah, echo chambers.
Right, echo chambers, yeah. So how do we get out of those?
Well, one strategy is to, actively seek out opposing views.
Okay.
Like purposely read articles or listen to podcasts that challenge your beliefs.
So even if it makes me uncomfortable.
Especially if it makes you uncomfortable.
Okay, so it's kind of like, stepping outside your comfort zone mentally, right?
Exactly. Another good trick is to play devil's advocate with yourself.
Oh, interesting.
Before making a decision, try to argue for the opposite side.
Oh, I like that.
You might be surprised by what you uncover.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's like having a little debate with yourself in your own head.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm liking these tips.
Good. We've got plenty more.
All right, well, what about the availability heuristic? That one always makes me think of those dramatic news headlines, that stick in your head.
Yeah, the availability heuristic, it's all about what we can easily recall. You see a plane crash on the news.
Oh, I know this one. You're suddenly terrified of flying.
Right, even though it's statistically much safer than driving.
Exactly, but those images are so vivid, It's like...
They're so available in your mind.
Yeah, and so you're like, oh my God, I'm never getting on a plane again.
It makes perfect sense, though. There's this study back in 1978 by Lichtenstein and some other researchers, and they found that media coverage, it can really distort our perception of risk.
Oh, wow.
So the more dramatic the story, the more we overestimate its likelihood, whether it's terrorism or a disease outbreak, even shark attacks.
So our brains are wired to remember the scariest stuff, even if it's not really that likely to happen.
It's like our ancient brain trying to keep us safe.
Right, exactly. So I guess the key is to be aware of how those vivid stories can kind of mess with our judgment.
Absolutely. Look at the data, not just the headlines.
Okay, check the D.
Focus on the statistics, fact check your own intuition.
Got it. Okay, I feel like we're getting pretty good at this whole cognitive bias thing.
Well, hold on. We've got more.
Okay, bring it on.
Let's talk about anchoring bias.
Anchoring bias, okay. I feel like this one probably affects everyone.
You're probably right.
Yeah.
Even the most logical thinkers.
Right. What is anchoring bias?
So anchoring bias, it's our tendency to fixate on the first piece of information we see,
Yeah.
even if it's totally irrelevant.
Okay.
That's like when you're shopping for, I don't know, a fancy watch.
Yeah.
And you see one for, let's say, $700. But you saw a similar one earlier for $1,000.
Right.
It suddenly feels like a steal, right?
Yes.
Even though $700 may still be way too expensive for that watch.
Yeah, but you're like, oh, I'm saving $300.
Exactly. That's how anchoring bias works. It just sits this baseline in your mind.
Right.
Dan Ariely, he's a behavioral economist. He did this cool experiment back in 2006.
Okay.
He showed how even random numbers could affect how much people are willing to pay for stuff.
Really? Random numbers?
Yeah, like the last 2 digits of your social security number.
No way. That's wild.
It's crazy, right?
So are we just at the mercy of these random anchors?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
The best thing you can do is gather a bunch of information before you make a decision.
Okay.
Don't jump at the first price you see. Shop around, do your research.
Right. Don't let yourself be anchored to that first thing that you see.
Exactly.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Speaking of, feeling swayed by emotions, what about loss aversion? That one's always been interesting to me.
Loss aversion is a powerful one.
Yeah.
It's that feeling that losing something hurts way more than gaining the same thing feels good.
Oh, for sure. 100%. Like losing $50 feels terrible.
Right.
But finding $50, you're like, oh, that's nice, but it doesn't feel as good as losing $50 feels bad.
Exactly. It's like your brain is amplifying the negative experience.
Yeah, for sure.
It goes back to Kahneman and Tversky, those guys who really revolutionized our understanding of these biases.
Yes.
They came up with this thing called prospect theory back in 1979.
Mm-hmm.
And they found that losses are psychologically twice as powerful as gains.
Wow.
So it explains why we often make choices to avoid losses, even if it means missing out on potential gains.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah.
It's like our brains are hardwired to protect us from those negative feelings.
Right.
So how do we overcome this loss aversion?
Yeah, how do we stop letting it, control our decisions?
Well, a good way is to kind of reframe your perspective. Instead of dwelling on what you might lose, focus on what you could gain.
So, look at the positives, not just the negatives.
Exactly. It's like looking at both sides of the coin.
Right, yeah. And sometimes getting an outside perspective can be helpful too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like someone who's not as emotionally invested in the situation.
Yes, a neutral party can help you see things more objectively.
Okay, I like that. All right, let's try to squeeze in one more bias before we wrap up this part of our deep dive. What about the halo effect? I feel like I've fallen for this one a lot.
Oh, the halo effect. It's a classic one.
Yeah.
That's when we let one positive trait about someone influence our whole impression of them.
It's like assuming that a celebrity who's a talented actor is also intelligent and kind and a financial wizard just because they're good at acting.
Exactly. We tend to generalize from one positive trait to their whole personality.
Yeah.
There was a study in 2014
Okay.
in Advances in Experimental Social Psychology, and they found that physical attractiveness can actually influence perceptions of competence, especially at work.
Oh, wow, that's kind of disheartening.
It is, right. It reminds us that we're all susceptible to these unconscious biases.
Right.
But, we can mitigate the halo effect by focusing on specific traits and accomplishments.
Okay.
Like, if you're hiring someone, create a structured evaluation based on their skills.
Okay.
And don't just be dazzled by their charisma.
Right. So don't let that one good thing overshadow everything else.
Exactly.
Okay. This is all so insightful.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of scary, too, because it makes you realize how much our perceptions are shaped by these, hidden biases.
It's like we're running around with all these mental shortcuts.
Yeah, and we don't even realize it. But don't worry, everyone. This is just the beginning of our deep dive. We've got more coming up, so stay tuned for part 2, where we'll explore even more cognitive biases and how they impact our everyday lives.
See you soon.
See you there.
Welcome back, everyone.
All right, we are back, diving deeper into the world of cognitive biases.
Ready for more of those mental glitches?
I am.
Good.
Mm.
Because the more we understand them, the better we can, take control of our decisions.
Right, exactly.
So let's keep going, shall we? Have you ever heard of the framing effect?
Framing effect. It sounds familiar, but maybe just a little refresher.
Sure, sure. So think about it this way.
Uh-huh.
Imagine you're choosing between two things, right?
Okay.
They basically lead to the same outcome, but they're worded differently.
Okay.
And it turns out the way they're worded can really change our choice.
Oh, I think I get it now. It's
Yeah.
like if a doctor tells you surgery has a 90% survival rate versus saying it has a 10% mortality rate.
Exactly.
It's the same thing, but
Same stats, but
it feels totally different.
it feels so different.
Yeah.
We tend to be more risk-averse when things are framed negatively.
Right. Even if it's logically the same odds.
Exactly.
Wow, that's sneaky.
Right.
It's like marketers use this all the time.
All the time. Politicians, too?
Oh, yeah. They might focus on what you lose if
Right.
you don't support them.
Instead of what you gain.
Yeah, yeah. So how do we avoid falling for this framing?
Yeah, what do we do?
Well, the key is to try and reframe the information yourself.
Okay.
Look at the data objectively. You know,
Detach yourself from the emotional language.
yes. Think about it from different angles.
Okay, so kind of take a deep breath and analyze it.
Exactly. Don't let the way it's presented
Right.
completely control your decision.
That makes sense. Okay, what about the sunk cost fallacy?
Oh, the sunk cost fallacy.
I feel like I've fallen for that one a lot.
It's a classic. It's like, sticking with something,
Yeah.
even if it's not working.
Just because you've already invested so much time, money, effort, whatever.
It's like watching a bad movie that you already paid for.
Yeah. You're like, well, I'm already here.
I might as well finish it.
Exactly, even though you're miserable.
Right. But logically, that doesn't make sense.
Not at all. But it feels hard to let go
It does.
because of those past investments. But remember, the past is gone.
Right.
We can't get that back.
That's true.
What we can do is make the best decision
Right.
for right now, for the future.
So how do we break free from that?
Well, here's a good question to ask yourself.
Okay.
If I were starting today, knowing what I know now, would I make the same choice?
Oh, that's a good one.
Right. If the answer is no,
Yeah.
maybe it's time to move on.
Even if it means accepting a loss.
It's about being honest with yourself
Yeah.
and not letting pride or stubbornness
Yeah.
keep you from making a better choice.
Okay, I like that. What's next?
All right, this one might be a little humbling, but it's important.
Mm-hmm.
The Dunning-Kruger effect.
Dunning-Kruger. I've heard of it, but refresh my memory.
Sure. So basically, people who aren't very good at something
Okay.
tend to overestimate their abilities.
Okay.
And those who are really skilled, they often underestimate themselves.
Oh, wow.
The less you know, the more confident you might be.
So it's like someone who's watched a couple YouTube videos and thinks they're a master plumber.
Exactly.
Oh, that's dangerous.
Yeah, it can be. And on the flip side,
Yeah.
the really skilled people, they might assume everyone else knows as much as they do.
Oh, that's interesting.
So they don't speak up, they don't share their expertise.
Right. So how do we navigate this?
Well, cultivating a growth mindset is crucial.
Okay.
Be open to learning.
Mm-hmm.
Ask for feedback from people you trust.
Yeah.
And be willing to admit when you don't know something.
It's hard to admit when you don't know things.
It is, but that's how you grow.
True. All right. What else? What other biases do we need to watch out for?
Okay, let's talk about the bandwagon effect.
Bandwagon effect. Okay.
This one highlights our tendency to just do what everyone else is doing.
Oh, like when everyone suddenly starts wearing those, platform shoes.
Exactly.
Or listening to that new song.
Yes, even if you don't actually like them.
Right. You just want to fit in.
It's like a deep-seated need to belong.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. So how do we avoid jumping on the bandwagon?
Well, become aware of those social pressures
Mm-hmm.
and question your motivations. Like, am I doing this because I want to?
Right. Not just because everyone else is.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to stand out a little.
Okay. I like that. All right. What about optimism bias?
Optimism bias.
That one sounds kind of nice.
Well, it can be, but it can also be a problem.
How so?
Well, it's our tendency to overestimate the likelihood of good things happening
Okay.
and underestimate the bad.
So it's like thinking you'll win the lottery.
Yeah, or assuming your new business will be a huge success.
Right. Even though the odds might be against you.
Exactly. While a little optimism is good,
Sure.
too much can lead to unrealistic expectations.
Right. And then you're disappointed when things don't go perfectly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do we balance optimism with reality?
Yeah. How do we do that?
Make realistic plans.
Yeah.
Consider the obstacles and have backup plans.
It's not about being pessimistic.
No, not at all.
It's about being prepared.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. This is all really eye-opening.
It's a lot to take in, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's making me realize how much these hidden biases shape our perceptions and our decisions and everything.
They really do. But we're not done yet.
Oh, there's more.
Oh, yeah. We've got one more part of this deep dive coming up, so stay tuned for even more insights and strategies to outsmart those mental glitches.
Okay, I can't wait. All right, welcome back, deep divers. We are in the final stretch of our exploration of cognitive biases. It's amazing how much we've learned already.
It really is. It's like we've been on this treasure hunt through our minds, right? Uncovering these hidden gems.
Yeah.
And let's face it, a few booby traps along the way.
Exactly, exactly. And it seems like just when you think you've seen it all, there's always another bias lurking around the corner.
Always another one.
Yeah. So for this final round, what other fascinating quirks do you have in store for us?
Well, let's start with something called the reactance bias. This one kicks in when we feel like our freedom is being restricted.
Ooh, reactance bias. Okay. That sounds familiar. Isn't that like when someone tells you not to do something
Yeah.
and suddenly it becomes way more tempting even if you weren't even interested before?
That's it exactly. It's like our brains just have this rebellious streak, you know? It pushes back against feeling controlled.
It's like reverse psychology.
Exactly.
So how do we avoid falling for that? How do we stop making decisions just because we feel like our freedom is being threatened?
Well, you have to be really mindful of how choices are presented to you. If you feel pressure or like someone's trying to manipulate you, take a step back, you know?
Okay.
Consider your options.
Don't just react.
Exactly. Ask yourself, am I doing this because I actually want to, or am I just reacting?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Good advice. What's next?
Let's talk about the authority bias.
Authority bias. All right.
This one is about how we tend to give more weight to the opinions of authority figures.
Oh, yeah. Even if they're wrong.
Even if they're wrong, exactly.
Eh.
We're kind of conditioned to respect authority.
Right. From when we're kids.
Yeah, parents, teachers, bosses, later on.
Right.
But we got to remember, authority doesn't always mean they're right.
That's true. Yeah. So how do we find that balance? Like respecting authority, but also thinking for ourselves?
Well, you always want to question the reasoning behind things,
Okay.
especially if something feels off, you know. Don't be afraid to challenge assumptions or ask for clarification.
So it's okay to push back a little, respectfully, of course.
Exactly. Blind obedience can be a dangerous thing.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I think we have time for one last bias before we wrap up.
All right, let's go with the in-group bias.
In-group bias, okay.
This one's about how we tend to favor people who are in our group.
Right, like our family, our friends.
Yeah, or your favorite sports team.
Oh, yeah, even when they're losing.
Exactly. It's like this tribal instinct.
We're hardwired for it.
We are. But it can lead to unfair judgments about people outside our group.
Right, it's like us versus them thinking.
Exactly.
So how do we overcome that?
Well, actively seek out diverse perspectives.
Okay.
Connect with people from different backgrounds. You know, challenge your own assumptions.
It's like remembering that we're all part of the same human family, even if we're different.
Exactly.
This has been such an incredible journey.
It had.
I feel like we've learned so much about these biases that affect, how we see the world, how we make decisions, everything.
And hopefully you can use this knowledge
Yeah,
to make better choices. Be more aware.
absolutely. What's the most important thing you want our listeners to take away from this?
Remember, we all have these biases.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of being human.
Yeah.
The key is to recognize them
Okay.
and then learn to work with them.
So we can make smarter choices, be more understanding.
Exactly.
This has been such a fantastic deep dive into the world of cognitive biases. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and keep those minds curious.
Your brain's built-in shortcuts might feel like a trap, but understanding them is the first step to breaking free. By recognizing these biases and applying the strategies we discussed today, you can start making clearer, more intentional decisions in every area of your life. Curious about more ways your mind shapes your reality? Subscribe to Cognitive Curves and join us as we uncover the fascinating psychology behind human behavior. Let's turn self-awareness into your superpower, one insight at a time.